Good afternoon. How's everybody?
Good. How are you?
I'm excited to be here.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm about washed out, but I'm okay. Boy, it's been raining in the west. Further west you go, the more rain you get. Man, it poured at Lake Norman for 3 days, and now I'm in Lake Lure, and it's even worse here. The roads are just full of water here. It won't be passable after dark. It's flooding everywhere in this part of the world, unfortunately. But I'm dry, at least for now, so I'm good to go. But it's a wet and wonderful time. All right. Anybody have anything exciting to share this week? Anything fun happened?
It's our last week of school.
I was going to say, for the South Carolina people, some of them got out last week.
We get out Friday.
Y'all get out. So Cherokee County got out, that touches Gardner Webb got out last week. I think Spartanburg gets out this week. Now, North Carolina folks don't get out till, gosh, up in June. I think they don't get out till about June 12th. So, but that's the vacation lobby that wants those beach rentals in August. Can't start school till Labor Day in North Carolina because of them. That's a long story, but and not a very good one either, unfortunately. I wish we could get back in North Carolina to where we could start school in early August and get first semester done by Christmas. That would be most helpful. We were able to do that one time back in the 90s in Charlotte, but boy, it was, the teachers loved it, the kids, the parents loved it, but the vacation lobby about burned the town down over rentals. And of course, I was the one that had led that charge as the senior high chair, the senior high principals. I got death threats from the vacation lobby. They wanted to put a hit out on me, but boy, I'll tell you, that was great. I love that year. We went to the block and did that. When you're doing block, you need to finish before Christmas. But, politics aside, we can't ever do the right thing for kids. That's a story for another day. All right. So it was week 3. This is week 3. So we need to look at our weekly schedule. We'll always start with that and see who our stars of the week were. Let me share my screen. Get out, buddy. There you go. So this week we're looking at our intervention and our EC, our special pops this week. Interview the chair of your school's intervention team. This is the school-based committee that receives referrals. This is what basically starts the MTSS process, or a part of it that leads to we have the 90 before the 90 now, where we're trying 3-tier interventions. And then if that doesn't work, we do the 90, the anecdotals and 2, and we try to, what am I looking for? We try 2 different processes with kids to try 2 different interventions with them. And then if that doesn't work, we go to EC testing. And so you need to find out how it works in your building. Everybody's not fully vested in MTSS. Everybody has to do the 90 for EC testing, but the 90 before that, that's where the intervention, that's where it gets tricky. It differs from school to school, district to district. You need to find out. That was supposed to be fully vested by now, but COVID slowed it down, and then we got people who are not doing the right thing. So you need to find out what's going on in your building. So the star for the week on that one, the star for last week on HR, and the star for this week is the same person, Sharon Stubbs. Sherry, congratulations. Did a great job on both of those. Very well documented, dug in, researched, just like you'd expect somebody to do. So, you can go, everybody can go to discussion board. You can read everybody's posts. I don't require that, but Sherry's, I would recommend reading both of hers on HR and on EC. and intervention and EC. The thing to remember about EC is you're most likely to be the LEA rep. And one of the things that you have to remind the people that work in your building is that although they did all the paperwork and made the recommendations and kind of drove the bus, the decisions at the end of the meeting are collaborative with the parent. That's a hard pill for some of them to swallow sometimes. And they'll want you to use your power or authority to overrule the parent, but we have to make decisions. I don't care who did the paperwork, how much work you did. They showed up last minute unprepared and hadn't read anything. I know that that's not right, but we have to understand that these decisions are collaborative with parents, and you're the person. Now, one of the things, if Dr. Sane was here with us tonight, he works with the other group, but one of the things that he would tell you is if you're the LEA rep, number one, make sure, but number two, because he's still involved in a lawsuit about 5 years later, and he fully acknowledges that from when he was principal, where an IEP meeting was held when it shouldn't have been. Now, I know that people put a lot of work in them and the staff puts a lot of pressure on you, but you cannot, as the LEA rep, just be flagging people down in the building and come sit in this IEP meeting. I need a regular ed person. If the person who is not who is the regular ed is not teach that kid, or there isn't one available, reschedule the meeting. That's a FERPA violation. We know what FERPA is. That's federal law on privacy. I've got that under tonight's week 3 under Zoom. Let me see if I can pull that up right quick. Let's see. Let me go over to this one. I've got that pulled up. I think that's page not found. Let's see. Here it is. I can close that one. I had to redo the link. But right here is the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA, and it says, what protections that you have to take to safeguard a child's educational record, their privacy, their demographic information, any of that stuff, that of the child and the family, that you have to take steps to do that. And as the LEA rep, when you've got a meeting scheduled, your staff's got all the paperwork done, you're all ready to go, but you don't have a regular ed teacher, reschedule. Don't just grab somebody. Don't do that. That will lead to a lawsuit, a privacy lawsuit. Now, generally that's not the real issue, but that's the stick they'll beat you with. And that one's easy to prove in court. Does this teacher teach this kid? Well, no, well then you lose. That's low hanging fruit. That's just general dumbassery that on that part. If the kid doesn't, if that kid's not in that teacher's room, don't bring them in the IEP meeting. It's just that simple. This is not hard. This is not hard. Well, but we might not get scheduled for another week. This is not hard. Don't bring people in the meeting that don't have standing legally, and that would be a violation of the FERPA law. Now, the FERPA laws are really strict, and I was in a public separate school that I was doing. I was supervising. It was one of the schools that I supervised, and it was a public separate in that it was all EC. And so you can't talk about any kid in the building in any way in an EC school because they all have protections. And so one of the things that when I went in, I was in the office and the door was open into the lounge, and I heard one of the teacher aides bloated out about a kid and this and that and the other. And I thought, well, anybody can walk in the front here. And that was one of those kinds of things that you got to be really careful about. Supposedly what happened in Dr. Sane's case is two teachers were having an ex parte conversation, and one of them went to the meeting, but they were having an ex parte conversation, and another teacher and a substitute overheard them, or a third teacher overheard them and knew the parent and told on them. So you just don't ever know. And he said he's still involved in that lawsuit after all these years. So don't let people in that don't belong, and don't be having ex parte conversations about EC kids in any way, even if it's just teacher to teacher. You never know who's going to be overhearing. So that's a big part of that. So if you haven't done this one already, you need to understand what your role is going to be, because most new APs, nobody wants to do the EC stuff, and you will be the LEA rep. I'm going to pause and catch my breath now, and we're going to go to our resident expert, Dr. Griffin Jordan. Good evening, as always, Dr. Jordan, and thank you for being with us. Tell us about how EC works in your building in terms of this particular function. We're going to dive into it more in a few minutes, but I want to kind of end this segment and before I move on with a reminder from the person who does this every day.
EC, whenever you're talking about the EC program, EC students, 504, anything like that, these are legally binding documents. Do not play with it. You need to know your students as they come into your school, if they have an IEP, if they have a 504, if they are considered homeless, McKinney-Vento, any of these types of situations, you've got to be on point because there are lawsuits waiting to happen. So make sure your team knows, and all the teachers at the beginning of the school year, the teachers should know all of the students in their class who have an IEP, who have a 504. This document is official, is legal, is formal. Make sure the teachers know the accommodations and because you can know that they have an IEP and not follow the accommodations and be in just as much trouble as if you didn't follow up at all. So just make sure whoever, whether is the assistant principal or MTSS coordinator who's over these particular programs, make sure they understand what their responsibilities are, and as the leader, you've got to monitor them all. You've got to be over it, because even if they are doing something, they do it wrong, like Dr. Lamb indicated, Dr. Lassane, he is still going through it now, even though he was not the teacher that was carrying on the conversation. It still falls on you. So just make sure everything is on point when it comes to EC and any type of legal documentation.
All right. We're going to revisit that tonight. That's going to be the bulk of what we do. But to conclude this early session on what you're supposed to be looking for when you're out there, please remember that intervention kids, while not placed with a 504 or in the exceptional children's program, in the eyes of the court, let me say this again, in the eyes of the court, they get the same protections as if they were already in those programs. You can't play, cannot play. Once a kid's been referred for intervention, that's in the eyes of the court, they get the same rights and protections if they were already in the program. Now, what Dr. Griffin Jordan was alluding to is this: that intervention team at your school, whether you call it the care team or the Care Bears or whatever cute name, I don't care, or acronym you got, MTS, I don't care what it is. In the eyes of the court and in the eyes of the state, it's what's known as a school-based committee, SBC. Well, what difference does that make, Dale? That and a cup of, that and $7 will get you a cup of coffee now. What does that matter? Well, I'll tell you why it matters. Back to Dr. Griffin Jordan's point, you're responsible for it. Now, if something goes wrong with the EC head count, there's somebody like a case manager or a CT compliance technician. It'll kind of go back on the chair of your department and them. No, but if something goes wrong on the intervention team in any way, there's nobody but you. You are responsible for your intervention team, whether it meets, whether it breaks the law, whether it follows through. That, in the eyes of the state and the eyes of the court, it is a school-based committee, and the principal is the responsible person. So you can't say, well, the EC person didn't follow through. No. The EC person is just there for information and to be a resource person in the intervention process. They are not the person responsible. Now, they are in an IEP meeting with a kid who's already placed, but during the intervention process, that would be you. You are the responsible person as the principal. You better make sure it gets done right. Those are the kinds of things that you need to be following up with if you haven't already done yours this week when you're out doing these. These are the big rocks. We're going to talk about the little rocks in just a few minutes, but these are the big rocks. All right. On our evidence work, everybody's doing well. Everybody's where they need to be. I think everybody's turned in. Our star for our evidence, and boy, she's a star by a mile, is Larissa. She's with us tonight. Larissa Purvis. Oh gosh, a star by a
Yes.
mile here. Larissa has, listen to this, has already completed her OMA, had it graded. She's already completed her skip, had it graded, and she's already done 2 tasks of the CAP. So I'm not expecting everybody to be her, but now that's pretty doggone good. That's the first time I've ever had anybody be this far ahead, and her work is great. It's not just that she's done it; it's great as well. So again, you can go discussion board and look at her work, and it is fantastic. And I don't know how she's this fast, but she is. She must never sleep. But congratulations. So she's the star of the week for our evidence work, and Sherry is the star of the week on our weekly activities. But everybody's is great. I could have picked a dozen other people as well. I mean, I'm sitting here looking, Jolynn, Daniel, Lisa again this week, Shannon, Treva. I mean, Alex, Pam, everybody, Steph. I mean, everybody did a good job this week. I'm excited about the work that I read every word of it. Michelle's work. I read every word of it every day. Y'all know that by now. I'm old. I don't have anything else to do. I love reading your work. I read every word of it every day. And your work is good. It really is. Dr. Griffin Jordan's doing a great job with y'all because his work is really good. And so I'm very pleased with that. Now, next thing on my list is case study 1. Let me give you a primer on case study 1. So at the end of case study 1, and don't do it now. At the end of case study 1, I want 2 things. Next week, you're going to present. You got 15 to 20 minutes or so. I want a PowerPoint. Everybody has to upload their team's PowerPoint. Otherwise, you won't get your points. And then you, in assignment Dropbox, which is private only, my eyes only, you get to tell me about the process. You know, say Jolynn was great, or boy, she was like dragging an amble. Yeah, you get to tell me whatever you want to tell me about the process. And so make sure you understand. So let me share my screen and we'll go look at that. So close that one. So if we go over here, so see, I've got case studies, drop boxes. Case group assignment, make sure to get up. So will somebody put everybody's got to put the same one in. So you get yours, and then you got to put your reflection in. And remember, you see your reflection is an assignment. It's not a discussion board. Only I read it. All right, so let's talk about case study 1. Bobby cheated. He turned his brother's paper in. So here's the case study. If you haven't read it, let's see. I've got it pulled up here somewhere. There it is. So Bobby turned in his brother's homework on a homework assignment. And so his teacher decided that she would illegally manipulate the grading scale to make that one homework assignment, not all the whole year's homework, just that one, count more than 50% of the yearly grade, and failed Bobby for the year. All right, so now the principal, he consults with the superintendent. The superintendent said, just be careful, this is politically sensitive. The reason why the superintendent didn't tell the principal what to do is very simple. If we go to the law, North Carolina general statute, who grades and classifies, the same as South Carolina, by the way, who grades and classifies students? Principal, period. Not teachers, not the superintendent. Principal has to make the ultimate grade decision for this student. So the principal consulted with the superintendent. The superintendent said, I can't tell you what to do. All I can tell you is this is politically sensitive, make the right decision. Now, some of you, as I have already seen, didn't understand that these case studies have a lot of things in them to throw you off. It doesn't matter who Bobby is. Doesn't matter about baseball. Doesn't matter about any of that stuff. There's nothing wrong. The school administration didn't make a mistake. They did nothing wrong. This is a teacher going rogue. You've got to understand that. So me and Daniel are out back behind the gym smoking. Now, smoking's not good. I'm not a smoker, but I don't think it's very good. But say me and Daniel are out behind the gym smoking. And, you know, and Larissa found us out there smoking, and she was the administrator in charge. All right. The standard is arbitrary and capricious. So arbitrary would be is she sends Daniel back to class and shoots me. Just pulls out a gun, bang. Well, that's arbitrary and capricious. I don't believe in the code of conduct that says you can shoot me over smoking. Seems a little excessive. So what happened in this case is the State Board of Education sets in each state, sets the policy on grading. And now I've got the full document right here. It's 9 pages long. And even I have trouble understanding it, and I do this for a living. Okay. That got, uh-oh. My computer dropped me. And so let's see here. I've got this, I had it pulled up here, but let me get it back right quick. I'm going to show you what the state puts out. The state board sets the grading policy. And so let me get back into Blackboard after I got kicked out. I knew if I was opening up all these windows, it would drop me. Hurry up here. So, and I'm going to drop this in after class tonight. I'll drop this in. Let's see. Oh, I did have it. Anyway, I've got the let's see if I've got it here. Should be under section 4. I have the state grading scale, but I've got it simplified. I'll pull it back up and add it. It jumped off the screen. Let's see. Right here. So here it is simplified. State Board of Education. State testing counts 20 to 30%. Now remember, this teacher took one homework assignment, made it count more than half the yearly grade, and failed Bobby for the year, which is the same as a illegal zero tolerance expulsion. Put him out for a whole year. Doesn't matter. It does not matter. Even if you give them an opportunity to do something different, like alternative school, still doesn't matter. It says so right here. I had that one pulled up as well. Let me pull it back up right quick. Expulsion under zero policy refers to an action taken by the school district, the LEA, of removing a child from his or her regular school for the remainder of the year or longer because of zero tolerance policy. Policy results in mandatory expulsion of student who commits these offenses. This is illegal. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you amend it to let them go to summer school or an alternative school. You have still, in the eyes of the federal of the federal government, federal law, you have zero tolerance to kid if you put them out, like failing them for the year. Didn't give him any due process, either substantive or procedural. Substance, what they're supposed to get. Procedural is what you gave them. Gave him none, put him out for the year. Failed him for the year. Manipulated the grading scale, because here's the grading scale. Again, I will show you the big one here, but this is the one. This is the one that says 20 to 30%. That's all state testing can count is 20 to 30%. And that's the valve for the possibility of quarterly. So if you do quarterlies, the quarterlies count 10 and the final, the EOG or EOC count 20. If you don't do that, you can count the EOG or EOC, the end of grade, you can count them as 30%. Class assignments, tests, 30%. In-class assignment projects, 20. And whether you want to call it an out-of-class assignment or project or homework, under my definition of homework, this was homework. For the year, they can only cumulatively count 10%. So again, arbitrary. She picked this kid, capricious, manipulated the state grading scale. Now, CMS has a grading scale. They put this out and says you can do this and can't do that. Now, don't be one of those people who think, well, you know, the teacher just didn't know. Dr. Griffin Jordan, what do you have to do at the beginning of the year at the mandatory workshop that you have for all your students, for your teachers on the mandatory work day? What do you have to cover in your faculty handbook required by law?
We have to cover the grading system. We have to cover discipline. There are certain things that all the teachers have to sign off on, that they have the information. The district's teachers, employees handbook, we have to cover, and that takes care of all of the standards, the academic standards, the behavior standards, the attendance, all of that has to be covered.
Thank you. Now, I'll tell you, when I was a high school principal in Charlotte, because we had so much faculty turnover in Charlotte, I did it twice a year. I did it at the beginning of the second semester, that work day as well, because I had new people by then, usually anywhere from 4 or 5 to 10 or 15. You had a lot of turnover. Make sure. So this is not, well, the principal didn't tell them or the teacher didn't know. The teacher went rogue, counted a homework, one homework assignment, more than half the yearly grade failed this kid. Now, do you remember when you were maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 or 6 years old, and your mama said, if your friend jumped off the roof, would you jump off with them? That's what this is. The teacher has broken the law. She's may end up in prison over this. This is not one of them, well, I would support the teacher publicly, but behind closed doors, I'd tell her not to do it again. No, you won't. No, you do not, because you know, you'll be in court with her. You'll lose your house just like she's going to lose hers. She has violated this kid's due process. She has been both arbitrary and capricious. She has violated state law and federal law, 14th Amendment. She, you know, the Office of Civil Rights is going to come down on y'all just like, you know, like a bad hangover on the Monday after Super Bowl. I mean, it's going to be bad. You're going to be lucky as principal that you don't get fired over what she did, even if you don't support her. You're going to be lucky to keep your job when the feds get done with you, because I'm going to tell you, you think our IRS audit's going to be bad. Wait till the OCR gets a hold of you and all these folks over this. Something like this. This is the most punishment that you could give. A kid could have brought a gun to school and wouldn't have got this much punishment. He turned in his brother's homework assignment. Alex asked the question, and I'm going to ask y'all next week. Alex is ahead of me. Most folks are smarter than me. Is this grounds for termination? That's the question I'm going to ask you next week. What are you going to do with this teacher? Now, Dr. Griffin Jordan's a lot better person than I am. She usually argues, you know, for an action plan and all of that. I'm not near that good a person. I'm firing this person today. I'll just go ahead and tell you. Can't work for me anymore. I can't. If you do this, what wouldn't you do? I mean, other than physically or sexually abusing a child, this is the most heinous thing that you're denying this child a right for an education for a whole year. Overturning in his brother's homework assignment. I mean, yes, it's as crazy as it sounds. So now if we went, I had it pulled up again and again, you saw my so here, you can see what I have done that. So you know what zero tolerance is, you understand the 14th. So let me Let me go back to our class. Let me go back to it. So I'll have to go to maybe, yeah. Let's go to the code of conduct. It says what we could do to this kid. According to the code of conduct, this is a level 1 infraction for cheating, misrepresentation, and honor code, I believe. All right. I had it up just a few minutes ago, so I cheated and looked already. Misrepresentation, false info, cheating, honor code. First time, tier 1 response, page 9. What's the most you can do under a tier 1 response? 1 day of ISS. That's the most you could do. According to the code of conduct, which is the rules you have to follow when you're processing discipline, and we're going to talk about that in 2 weeks. When you're processing discipline, you have most districts either have a level or a tier system where you have some variation, and even within them, like this one, this is the tier 1 responses. You could have done anything from just talk to the parent to the most you could do is 1 day of ISS. He got excluded for 365 days, the same as if he'd have shot somebody in school. He could have brought a gun and got less than this. The handbook says you can do 1 day of in-school suspension. He got expelled, failed for a whole year, overturning his brother's homework assignment. That's the definition of capricious. I mean, is this really a discipline issue that, oh, we got to teach this kid a lesson? Really? A whole year out of school for turning in his brother's homework assignment? Now, I don't have a problem if you give him a 0 on the assignment, or if you let him make it up for a lesser grade or whatever. You could do it that way, or if you just wanted to go the discipline route, you can do 1 day of in-school suspension. But you definitely can't manipulate, in violation of federal and state law, manipulate the grading scale to fail him for the year over turning in his brother's homework. Jeez, that's a little much. You say, well, Dale, this is obviously great. No, I've seen things like this before where teachers just, I've had enough. Now, first thing I generally say when we talk about this case is and I haven't said it yet, but I'll say it now. I'll go ahead and acknowledge right now that Bobby's probably a turd. That's not a clinical term, but it's probably accurate. Bobby's probably been a pain in her posterior all year long, and she's just done with it. And his family's probably the same way. How many times have you've been in a parent conference, and what you want to say is the problem is your kid's an idiot and it's hereditary. He got it from you. But you can't say stuff like that, and you can't take a run at a kid like this just because you think you have an opening. I mean, this teacher's violated everything in the world, but these are the things that I can see. It's kind of like an iceberg. I can see this part. This is about as bad as it gets, other than physically or sexually abusing a kid. This is as bad as it gets. What is she doing that I can't see? She can't work for me anymore. I can't take the risk. I mean, people have you in court now all the time. All the time. You stay in court, just like I was talking about. Dr. Singh he'd tell you he's still in court 5 years later over 2 teachers having an ex parte conversation because one of them was not supposed to be in the meeting because she didn't actually teach them, but they were discussing what went on in the IEP meeting that she wasn't supposed to be in, and they were discussing it out in the hallway, and another teacher overheard it, and he's still in a lawsuit over that. So don't tell me that you wouldn't be in a lawsuit over this. This is federal. You'd be in federal court in downtown Charlotte. That would not go well, by the way. Parking's terrible over on that side. I've had to be there too many times when I had to go for the district, when I worked in CMS, when I was the one that had to go too many times. I've been to the courthouse on 4th Street. Of course, I could walk from the Ed Center over there, just not get run over. Busy street there on 4th, but going to have to go to the federal courthouse, not fun. They don't talk very politely to you either, by the way, when you get there. And, it doesn't matter that you're just there representing the district. It does not matter. They do not talk politely to you. It does not go well. It doesn't go like you don't get to sit and argue and think, and then, well, this is the way I want it to be. They tell you how it's going to be. You don't want to go unless you have to go. And you certainly don't want to go over something as easy as this one. So I have pretty much told you how the case is going to work. But if you think that this is a principal problem or a superintendent problem or that the teacher didn't know or any of those things, that's none of those things are true. There, see, as I had pulled up, but CMS's grading policy is 9 pages long, where it goes into every possible scenario. But that's why I said I just will boil it down for you. Here's how it is. But nowhere in there does it say anything. Even a state test can count more than half the yearly grade. Most of that can count as 30. And that's if you don't do quarterlies. So you got to know the law here, folks. You got to know whose responsibility it is. It's the principal's responsibility to assign that final grade. And you got to know that the Office of Civil Rights says that you can't do this. You can't zero tolerance kids without having due process. Remember, Tinker versus Des Moines, 1969 said kids get due process in school. They get to tell their side of the story. They get to hear it. You got to present the evidence, and it's got to follow your policies. What you charge them with has to be in the handbook, and the sentence that the consequences that you handed down must fit within the range that's allowable in that code of conduct. None of those things happen to you. None of those things happen. Dr. Griffin Jordan has an assistant principal who I'm guessing processes discipline at her school. She's mentioned that before. But Dr. Griffin Jordan, who in the end is responsible for that discipline that gets done at your school?
I am responsible in the end, even when we have to submit our school data to the district. They've indicated that they want the principal's signature, not anyone else's. So that puts me in the hot seat. I have to meet with my assistant principal because even though he is over discipline, I've got to make sure we're always on the same page. He's representing the school and me, and our thoughts have to be the same. So we have to make sure that we're following the district's matrix, but also that if something comes back from a parent or anything, that I would be saying the same thing that he has told them when he's met with them. So, and if you have more than one assistant principal, I'm lucky I only have one. If you have several, if you're a very large school, that's even in more of an importance for you to make sure every single person that is doing discipline in your school speaks the way that you would have them speak, because in the end, it's going to come back to you and you're going to have to explain why you made certain decisions, whether it was you that made the decisions or not. It's going to be you. So you have to make sure everybody's on the same page.
Thank you. And you're going to do discipline as a new AP. Remember, all the bad jobs, bus duty in cold weather, hot weather. Again, don't get run over, wear a long coat in wintertime. That's pretty easy to learn. But some of this stuff is not. And if there's only 2 of you, a principal and an AP, it's pretty easy to get on the same page. My last principalship, there was 9 of us processing discipline. We had a little over 3,000 students. I had 6 APs, 2 assistants too, which are now called deans, and me. There was 9 of us process discipline for about 3,200 kids. Now, we had to meet every Friday to make sure we stayed on the right page. But you can track your data in PowerSchool to make sure that you're staying within the range. There's inter-rater reliability, but that's a big part of it. Again, you can't be arbitrary. One person gives a kid nothing and one gives them out of school suspension. That's arbitrary. So you've got to make sure that everybody's on the same page when you do this. Now, Daniel asked a question that in the chat that usually gets me fired up, but I'm gonna try to remain calm tonight. Do not, just don't get involved with coaches getting involved in disciplining kids through their athletics, through practice, through running laps, through any of that stuff. Do not do that. That will not end well. That will go badly for you. Process discipline in the back of the office, again, not in the front, process it there. If they're an athlete and they get suspended, they can't play or practice, and that's just the way it goes. But don't, usually but that's the same for the band. That's the same for the chess club. Any extracurricular activity, if you're suspended, you can't participate. If you're still in school, then you participate. But don't get coaches involved in discipline, because then they think they don't have to tell you stuff. Oh, I just handle that myself. Oh, that's the reason I had to let the principal, all the APs, and even the data manager go at one of the high schools in Charlotte, because we're handling it ourselves in house. We don't do that with rapes. There is no such thing as in house. What are you talking about? But don't get involved with coaches being involved in it in any way. There are rules in terms of, one of my students, I think it was in last summer's class, or maybe it was last fall class. Tara said, well, how do we know that these kids aren't practicing 4 or 5 hours a day? And that's the reason he could, because we have the North Carolina High School Athletic, and South Carolina has one too, athletic handbook. That is, oh my Lord, down in the weeds in terms of how much you can practice and when and all those things. Now, if he's practicing 4 or 5 hours a day, then the first person I'm calling in is my athletic director. You get 90 minutes a day, period. You can only practice 90 minutes a day, and you're only playing 2 games a week. Explain to me why this kid says he can't do his homework because he's got 4 hours of practice a day. If that's us, then I've got a problem. Now, if he's playing fall ball or travel ball or whatever, that bunch of kooks, that they play every waking hour. Well, that's on them. That the family made that choice. But now, if I've got somebody on our faculty doing that, then we've got a bigger problem, because we violated. We're going to have to probably forfeit games because we've not been following the rule. Every sport says when it can start, when it can finish, how many games they can play, how much they can practice each day, how many hours a week, participation, out of season, all that stuff is defined. But athletics needs to stay separate than discipline and academics. Don't involve your coaches, because the first time you do, then coaches are dumb. I was one, and we're not smart. If we think that if you let us have any authority, then the next time it comes up, well, we'll just do that ourselves. No, you're just asking to lose your house now. Why in the world, myself included, the people that used to butt heads like goats, why in the world would you want them making decisions on anything? I've got 2 big helmet scars on my head now. I played back before we had air bladders. I can tell you that I've had, 7 or 8 concussions. I've got 3 scars on my head from 3 of them. 1 8 stitches, 1 11, and 1 14. So I know that I was concussed those 3 times. And so why would you want somebody like me making decisions like that? Daniel, follow up on your question. Or you might have a better point than that.
No, I wasn't going to say let the coaches handle it, and more collaboration with the coaches. Like, look, your student is cheated, your players cheated, exit from the team for 5 games. That's where when I coached high school baseball in Ohio, we had sort of, I wouldn't say a similar situation, but we had some misconduct, and the principal worked with the coach and said, he's not going to play for a few games.
Yeah, we used to do that. And I remember I coached 40 some odd years ago. I started out as a high school varsity baseball coach, head coach, and assistant football coach. That's how I got started in the business after I quit playing. And we used to do that all the time. That is not by design anymore. But that went out probably, I want to say about 1990. That was, in North and South Carolina, about 1990, that went out when we started adopting codes of conduct, and the General Assembly got involved with discipline, and we started doing discipline tracking, and we did the first rudiments of what was called SIMS, and then SIMS became, but it's now Power School. When we started all of those things, we got out of that, letting them, instead of doing it, we would negotiate with coaches, and that's why I said, but we that's no longer legally allowable. That was probably finalized when we went to the final phase in '95 for secondary schools when they got onto the state ABC track, and we got them fully vested in all the laws and accountability pieces, and we started tracking all their data. And then by the time we got everybody converted over to Power School about 10 years later, we just don't do that anymore. We don't, if they have a school problem. Now, if he's late for practice or he's goofing off or he's got his glove on, on his head, sleeping in the outfield or whatever, then that's what you do. I mean, you've had all those things if you coach baseball. If they weren't, if they were early adolescents, you had all those things happen. If that's the case, then that's what the coach would do with them. But for like a homework infraction or a tardies or something bad happening in school, no. Some violation of a school rule, you have to handle it inside because they get due process. Now, if the coach wants to do that, that's up to him. But now again, he's got to be careful not to be capricious on it, giving way too much. And that's what would scare me about coaches doing that kind of stuff as well. Sometimes I've had to speak to coaches about, I want you to have discipline on your team and I want you to be in charge, but I don't want to be in court either. 50 suicides is a little bit too much, maybe 5. We can't just be out there running suicides so they, and I don't ever want to hear that you're going to make somebody do this until they throw up. Oh God. Or we don't give them water. All the stuff that we've done. I said we. That's right. I said we. But that's the way it was back then. But times change and people do, and we get smarter, hopefully, over the years. But that's a great point, Daniel. That's a great point. You just can't take that risk, or I wouldn't, because it is illegal to do that. And I again, even if you got the best coaches in the world but again, if the parent sues you, you're going to lose, because that's not in the code of conduct that you can take their playing time. It's not part of it. Nowhere in that code of conduct it says if they get 7 tardies this week that they don't get to play Friday night. It doesn't say that. I mean, we have to go by the code of conduct and only do what's in it. And all that data is tracked now. And since 2014, by the way, both states collect data straight to OCR. We used to file a separate report. Not anymore. They get the data when we get it. So you can't be doing stuff like that anymore. There was a time when we did, and it wasn't a bad thing. But, there was also a time when I taught school that, you'll see how big I am when you graduate. There was a time when we used to whip kids with paddles too. And somebody finally on the faculty there that was a lot older and smarter than me, he said, you realize you go to court, they're going to look the size of that kid and they're going to look the size of you. It don't matter what he did, you're going to lose. He said, good Lord, big as you are, you can't be hitting kids. It's just not the right thing to do. Number one. Number two, you're going to lose your house when you go to court. They're going to look at him. Good Lord. Yeah, the size differential alone is going to make you lose that case. Don't matter what he did. And that was probably the best advice I got as a young teacher is, that optics play a part in this as well. You just got to be smarter than that. All right. So that's the case study. We've caught up everything. Now we're going to spend a few minutes on discipline. Now, as I said, I've got a PowerPoint. Now I always like to give credit where credit is due. I've got a couple of PowerPoints. Now, one of them is mine. Again, that's what you can do to a kid. One of them is mine, and this one is not very good. And then I've got one this is mine. All right. So this one is, if you don't know, we're shifting back over to exceptional children. If you don't know the difference between the inclusion model and the mainstream model of EC, these are the only two that are still left that I'm aware of, other than self-contained in a public separate setting. These are the two models that we use. Most everybody is going to inclusion. Now, before we start, I'm going to acknowledge inclusion is not a better delivery model. It's a cheaper delivery model. And that's why we went to it. It costs 30% less. So that's why we're doing it, is because to save money. But if you don't know what it is, this is a pretty good one. Now, Now, I'll tell you, we're not gonna go through this one. This one is 63 slides long. Doesn't take that long, about 15 minutes, but this is a pretty good primer on the difference between if you've got mainstream EC at your building or if you've got inclusion-based model at your building. Now, this is going to be real important when we get to the last case study. You're going to need to know this stuff in order to be able to do the last case study. This will be really helpful, but I'm not going to go through it tonight. I am going to go to Dr. Griffin Jordan right quick to tell us what model she uses at her school and what the main tenets are. Dr. Griffin Jordan.
We use inclusion at our school. We have, of course, and you'll learn at the beginning of your school year, you set up your master schedule based on your EC students, your special populations. That's how you build your schedule, because if you didn't, you'll have one EC student over here, one over there, 10 over there, 5 over there. And if you only have a certain number of teachers, that's going to cause a problem because somebody's not going to get their service. So you have to make sure that you have your EC teachers where they have the ability to serve the students that they need to serve and the time that they need to serve them. So we do have inclusion classes where our EC services, our EC teacher pushes into our classes and supports students while they're in the main classroom setting. Depending on their IEP, there are certain times that they will be pulled out for quizzes or tests or different things just according to their IEP. But as a general, as a whole, we do practice inclusion.
Now, thank you, Dr. Griffin Jordan. So what that means is the teacher pushes in rather than the kids being pulled out. Mainstreaming is we put kids in like PE or art or something like that, but we pull them out together for their regular instruction. That's the opposite of inclusion. So you need to know the difference between those two. But as Dr. Griffin Jordan said, there's a reason why the 5 rationales for scheduling is start with federal programs. She just told you why. If you don't, you're not going to meet everybody's IEP, and then you're going to be busting rocks, making little ones out of big ones in the penitentiary. That's what's going to happen to you. So make sure you understand that that's why we start with those federal programs first, because they're the hardest to accommodate and meet. The inclusion model, again, we push teachers in. Mainstream model, for some classes, we pull kids out. But you need to know the difference in the two. Now, Dr. Sane has made us a tremendously good PowerPoint. Again, his is good, mine's not good. One of the reasons why his is better than mine is that his is much shorter. It's still 27. But what he's got here is what administrators should know with complying with EC policies governing, services for children with disabilities, FAPE, free and appropriate public education. He goes through that. Child find, that means you got to find these kids and make sure that they're in your school. You got to even account for the ones that go to private school. You can't just have EC kids out there and not getting services. If they're in your district, Child Find says that you got to serve them. Least restrictive environment, that's what we're talking about when we're talking about mainstreaming and inclusion. The least restrictive is inclusion, where we push the teachers in, they get to stay in the regular classes. Outside of that, it's mainstreaming, where for certain classes, they get to be out loose in the population, but others we pull them in. But again, the least restrictive environment is the law, continuum of alternative placements. And so regular classes, special classes, you got to meet the needs no matter what. Now I'm going to pause right here and talk about discipline for EC kids. The most common and I had a file pulled up on this, but we won't take the time to go back and find that either. When an EC child or 504 child commits a discipline infraction, we must make sure that it's not a part of their disability. And that would be called a manifestation. We have to do a manifestation determination. Now, we don't have to do that manifestation determination until we're looking at 10 days out of school suspension, except that's not true. there are a number of caveats to that most people don't know or don't support until they lose their job. So the first one is this. If you just move that kid from one room to the other, that counts as a day of that 10. Let me say that again. They're in Miss Fletcher's room and you move them over to Miss Porcelli's room, that counts as a day. You put them in in-school suspension, that counts as a day. You give them detention, that counts as a day. You give them a bus suspension, that counts as a day. You got 10. So this notion was, he was just suspended for out of school for 3 days. Those other seven were ISS. No, that's 10. That means manifestation termination, functional behavior assessment, Deck 5, behavior intervention plan, psychological, updated IAP, and the whole schmear. You got to do it all to see if their behavior is a manifestation of their disability. Now, that's the first mistake I see. People, they don't know how to count to 10. They think they get to pick what they count to 10. If they're not in the regular, if butt and seat rule, if their butt's not in their regular seat, that counts as a day. That's pretty graphic. That's easy to understand. Now, the second part of that, the caveat to that is pattern. God, this is the one that used to get me. I used to have to sit in court all the time over this one. If a kid shows a pattern, he moves to the front of the line, regardless of how many days that you have disciplined him. The third time he does exactly the same thing, he gets a manifestation determination, whether you've suspended him or not. And I can't tell you how many principals, but we still had 3 more days. What are you talking about? If they show a pattern would be 3. If he does the third time, the kid does the same discipline infraction, they move, they pass go, they collect $200. They get the manifestation determination. That's the one that gets you. That's the one that gets you. This kid's showing a pattern over here, and you're ignoring it. Just give them 1 day every time, and they've done the same thing 3 times in a row. Well, third time they do it, you need to do the manifestation determination. Determine if their behavior is a manifestation of their disability. If not, they go. If it is, they go back to school immediately. Got that one in there. And so, so you've got to understand that. So let's see if that's if we've got that in our slideshow here. Placement decisions. Here we go. Again, they're collaborative with the parents. Children in private schools, again, that's child find. You got to make sure they're getting them. Children in private schools, parental consent, referrals, initial evaluation. He's got all that stuff. Required screenings, reevals, MTSS, RTI specific learning, again, how that fits in development of the IEP, procedural safeguards and process for parents and children, procedural safeguards, discipline. Here we go. Be proactive with behavior intervention plans, manifestation determination. He explains it for you right here. Within 10 days of change in placement, again, change in placements. Anytime his butt's not in his regular seat, don't care what you call it, don't matter. Must determine if the manifestation of the child's disability, the IEP determined either conduct was met. And so here's what happens. Definition of change: out of school, in school, change it. He right here. Accelerated manifestation due to a pattern. Right there you go. Out of school, in school, bus, changing of schedule or classroom. Accelerated due to a pattern, 3 times doing the same thing. Right there it is. That means that you got to put them up. Now, manifestation determination. Minimum expiry, everything you got to do to comply with the law. Everything. All right. Manifestation determination. The conduct was a manifestation. You got to put him back in the room immediately. Return the child their original placement immediately. Well, but I gave them a 5-day suspension. They've only served 1. Don't matter. They come back immediately. Now, if we determine it's not a manifestation, then they can be disciplined like any other child in the building. Got to understand that. Now, again, I'm trying to bank some time because next week's going to be a marathon. I've got some really good stuff for you. Again, I've got that. I'll get, I've got a couple of things I've got to put back in, but understanding, got some really good things for you under, let me see, let me share my screen. If his presentation should be there, if it's not, I'll put it there that I just went over. Let me go back home, Blackboard, see if it's there. But again, it's a primer. Again, spend some time with that manifestation and inclusion. If you don't know the difference between the two, no, I'll put it in just right now. I'm gonna put that one in, make sure it's there. I'll get that one underneath our Zoom session 3. But next week, it's your week. I'm gonna turn it over. You'll present. Again, 15, 20 minutes, 25 maximum, and then you got to be able to defend what you decide to do. I gave you the answer, Keaton. I've got a video right there from past times where I ranted and raved and through stuff and people got it wrong. So hopefully you won't get it wrong next week. Dr. Griffin Jordan, you can take us out. You can do the benediction tonight. We're right on time. Look at us.
Well, just to follow up with the manifestation determination, as a new administrator, that was the whole EC process was a lot to learn. But the slideshow that Dr. Lamb showed you, that was, I believe you said Dr. Lasane's.
Dr. Sane put that one together. Well, he and I'll give
Yeah.
him credit though. I did the dumb stuff. Yeah.
It's amazing. It's very precise. It would be only beneficial to look through there. When you have the manifestation determination meetings, they could end up being long meetings. So just be patient with the process. You're actually determining if whatever that student's disability is a direct correlation to what the disciplinary infraction is. For instance, if you have a student who continuously gets in a fight, and of course you suspend because of fighting, and his disability is ADHD, that's something you're going to have to kind of look at. If they were suspended because they continuously jumped out and ran out of class, their anxiety got the best of them, and they were doing things that you could, it's documented that, oh yes, that possibly could be a manifestation. They're nervous about the test. They spoke out or ran out or did something along those lines for ADHD. Look at whatever the doctor's diagnosis is. Make sure you have a highlighter and you highlight what the doctor's telling you could be some side effects or some things that the student would go through or what you can expect. But if it's just fighting, that is something that you're going to have to, especially if you have the parent that's like, I don't want my child suspended. Everything is a manifestation of his disability. That's going to be conversations, and you're going to have all of your ducks in a row. That documentation that you're going to get from that physician, that's going to be paramount. That you please have your highlighter and underline and just know everything that is in his diagnosis as you're coming into those meetings, so that you can have that conversation with the parents and the team to determine if it really is a manifestation of the student's disability.
Thank you. Y'all are doing great. I'm excited for next week. I'm really looking forward to your presentations. I know they'll be great. And we'll see you then. So everybody have a good week. Keep working.
Bye.
Bye-bye.